everyone. It is Tony, and I am so excited for my guest today that you're going to meet on Women In. But before we dive into who is joining me, let me tell you what you're listening to. Women In is a podcast that celebrates women in all walks of life and the people in their lives who are lifting them up. You're going to hear from all kinds of super cool people in my life, and they're going to share their stories to inspire others to support all the extraordinary women around them. This is a space to be disruptive, forward-thinking, and change agents for humankind. It is uncensored, fun, and curiosity-driven. This is what I'm passionate about, breaking down the barriers for my kids' generation. It's equal parts about my guests and the places we came into each other's lives, whether it be the Kalamazoo Wings, Mindfulness Elevated, Tony Will Coaching, or my guests happen to be in my family and friends circle. My very special guest today is none other than Bernie Saunders. Bernie played 4 seasons at Western Michigan University in Kalamazoo from 1975 to 1979. He recorded 154 points in 140 games. He then went on to become only the 5th Black hockey player to play in the National Hockey League, or the NHL. And he followed some amazing, great players. Saunders led Western Michigan in goals 3 times, earning the All-CCHA Second Team honors in 77 and 78, and was twice recognized as a team's MVP. He captained WMU his senior year and was inducted into the WMU Athletic Hall of Fame in 1994. Saunders was born in Montreal, Quebec, and played 10 games for the Quebec Nordiques during the 79-80 and 80-81 seasons, along with 181 games in the American Hockey League, the AHL for Syracuse Firebirds, and the Nova Scotia Voyageurs, and with the Kalamazoo Wings in the IHL after that. So here's the cool stuff, because you guys will figure out K-Wings is how we connected. The Kalamazoo legend played part of 3 seasons with the K-Wings. He joined the K-Wings for 3 games after graduating from WMU in 78-79, before the team's ascent to the Turner Cup, and then returned to the team in 81-82. During that season, Saunders joined Brent Jarrett on the same line en route to Jarrett's IHL Most Valuable Player of the Season, with the two combining 197 points. Following his hockey career, Bernie spent 30 years in the pharmaceutical and biotech industries, beginning with Upjohn Company before moving on to other executive commercial positions within the industry. Bernie's bio is amazing. And one of the things I want to add, that Bernie has 3 sons, 2 of which played hockey and also faced racism in the sport, as well as was one of the catalysts for writing the book. We're going to talk about Bernie's book called Shutout. And Bernie is a brother of the late ESPN sports broadcaster John Saunders, and is currently retired and living in Greenville, South Carolina. Hi, Bernie.
Hey, that was a lot.
It was, but it's worth reading all of it, because you are quite the legend, and there's so many places we're going to go with this interview, but I'm so excited that you're on Women In, and it's been an honor to get to know you, especially this hockey season. We've become fast friends, and I'm so glad you're here today.
Thanks for having me.
So tell everyone, I ask everyone the same question, but and I let the cat out of the bag a little bit, but how did you and I meet?
Well, it was probably inevitable. You can almost ask the question, why hadn't we met before? Because I played for the Wings, and you, of course, run the Wings, and so it's a natural thing. But I've kind of dropped out of the sports and athletic world, and so I don't follow the K-Wings or anything else, and so I had no knowledge that you're running the program. I had no knowledge that you had a Black coach, and a coach that had played for the program for so many years. But then I was asked to host the ECHL Heritage Weekend, and it came together because of that. And you were on the phone, and I thought, well, this must be the marketing director or something. And says, no, this is the general manager. And I thought, whoops, that's wonderful. So congratulations. I think that's just wonderful to have, kind of my alma mater, to have a Black coach and a woman running the program. I think that's just wonderful to see.
Yeah, and you said that to me on the phone. You're like, this is fantastic. How I remember it, because and you didn't use this word, but I always do. You're like, that's awesome. I could tell that you genuinely were impressed by that, and not per se me, but the fact that it was a woman. And I could tell, like, you immediately got it, and because of what you experienced playing hockey. And so I was reading your book at the time and I said, I'm reading your book and I love it. And there was just so much I could relate. So just for anyone who hasn't, I'm holding it up, but if you're not watching the podcast and you're listening to it, this is what it looks like. It's called Shutout, the game that did not love me black, I think is the best subtitle ever.
Thank you.
And I read it from cover to cover. And and you and I have talked several times about this off air, and I interviewed you at the Hall of Fame dinner for the ECHL this past January, and we talked about some things in this book. But tell me or tell the listeners what spawned you on to write a book about this, about, being a black hockey player and what that was like in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, the thing with life, I'm 60, turning 67 years old, and life, you just live it, right? You just wake up in the morning and you go about your day. And so I had a lot of oppression in my life, and hockey was my life, and so it was difficult living through that. But you just live through it and do the best that you can, and you don't really complain. And so that was kind of the way I lived my life. But then Tony, later in life, as you mentioned, two of my boys became hockey players, and I saw them face the same racism and kind of nasty stuff that I faced. And as an individual, I was a big boy and I felt I could take it. But when you start to pick on my sons, that gets me pretty upset. And so there are several things that drove me to write the book. But I think I would say the main one was the fact that I saw my sons go through the same type of racism and oppression that I went through. I felt like, Bernie, you've lived your life, but you haven't really helped others. You haven't done anything about it. And so I felt, I want to do something, at least something within my legacy to try to influence the things that I'm seeing. And that was the main impetus. I'm a very private person. And so stepping out in the public forum was difficult for me. But yeah, I did it pretty much to kind of shelter my sons from the things that I had gone through.
Yeah, and you had said in the book there was one piece. I'm looking at my notes from when I interviewed you on stage, but you talked about silence being complicit, right?
Yeah.
And that is still ringing in my head, and I actually use that when I'm talking about being a woman
Okay.
in a male-dominated industry. And actually, there's an interview coming out with me this week that Chris interviewed me for Women's International History Month, and I talk about that silence is complicity, and by not speaking up. And for someone like you who is more, you prefer not to be in the limelight, let's say it that way. Has it freed you in a sense to do you feel like you've helped others by speaking up and not being silent?
Oh, that's a great question, because I definitely know that I've helped some, because I've received some emails and calls and things like that. And so yeah, there's been some movement, but it just has not been what I had hoped. And if you were to ask me the question, would I do it again? I'm not sure if I would, based on the response. It was published up in Canada, and they thought it was going to be like a huge seller, and it just kind of did okay. So I was disappointed with that. I did I would say an inordinate amount of press, and so it got a lot of press coverage. And I was on national TV and all the papers up in Canada. But it just didn't get much traction, and the NHL pretty much kind of snubbed it and didn't do anything. So that was disappointing for me, because I really felt like if I'm going to do this, then I'm going to dedicate a year of my life and just do it the right way. And like I said, it just didn't gain the traction that I wanted. And so I'm glad I've helped people, but I would have liked to have helped a lot more than it did.
Yeah, and so I was sharing with you because I'm writing a book right now, and like a book, I forget what percentage. It's like less than 5% of books reach 1,000 copies sold. And you
Right.
and I were having coffee one day, and I said, "Well, how many books you sell?" Which is well north of 1,000. And I'm like, "Well, you're a huge success, like a huge one." And so I know it depends who we're comparing to, but you had such a huge impact on me when I read it as a
Oh,
white
thank you.
woman. And so you definitely helped this one. So I want to say thank you for being so honest. And because I get I have no tolerance for racism, and to this day, and this is a naive part of me, it still exists, which I'm
Oh,
sure you're
yeah.
like, yeah, of course, Tony. And I'm like, it blows my mind. And we were dealing with something like this at a hockey game not too long ago, and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
So when you still hear that these things are going on, are you surprised by this at all, or is this what you kind of expect?
I'm not sure if surprised is the word, but I'm just very, very disappointed. Martin Luther King, I don't have heroes, but if you ask me who my hero was, I would say Martin Luther King. I just thought that he had such an impact. And like I admire people like you because in my life, there weren't, these social forums where you could actually, get your voice out there and make an impact. And so in my life, Tony, I saw the world changing by evolution. So for example, the racism that I faced was pretty strong, but it was less for my sons, and my expectations was it would be less for my grandsons. And so I could see that arc. And so for me, I was happy just seeing that arc. And so I wasn't inspired to try to do something to influence that trajectory. Unfortunately, and actually Martin Luther King had a great saying that said the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Well, here's where I'm going with this, is that in my life, I was happy with that, because obviously you're not going to change the world in a day. But over the last, I don't know, 6, 8 years, whatever, that trajectory has changed. And so the racism that I thought I put behind me resurfaced, and there's more and more. Now I moved south, and so that's part of my problem. But for example, I live in a neighborhood where there's people here that don't want me in this neighborhood. And so I went through a series of about a month and a half or so where somebody was depositing doggy doo-doo bags on my property. And so I had to put up, cameras and so on and so forth to protect myself. And so my point is, when the arc was bending towards justice, I was happy with it. But now I think the arc is kind of flattened off, and I think racism is kind of increasing as opposed to decreasing. And that's what really leaves me depressed, because you're supposed to leave the planet in a better way than you found it. And I think that, I'm a baby boomer, and I think that our generation, we're not doing that. I think that we're leaving it worse off than we found it. And that's very disappointing to me.
What do you say to the next generation? Like, I've talked before, well, I mean, hockey is a super white sport. We're making some headway, and some, I mean, if you look at the K-Wings, we're doing okay. Our head coach, Joel, is black. TJ Scott in my front office, he's black. We've got, I mean, but you played, when you were playing, that's 45, 46 years ago, right? And so we are making some headway, but what do you say to that generation? Or because your sons are in that generation, or grandkids, how do you inspire? What mindset would help them, where, to your point, like, are you really leaving where we're at better off than where it was when you were there? So what advice do you give?
My advice is kind of a little bit different, because hockey is almost a social club, and it has its really strict rules, and not all the rules are written, so there's a lot of unwritten rules, which kind of drive me nuts. And so the perfect example, it's a small example, but scoring celebrations. Score a goal. When you score a goal in hockey, it's a pretty awesome thing, especially if it's a special goal, a special time or whatnot. And man, you just want to party and enjoy yourself. One of the written rules of hockey is that you don't show up your opponent, and so you don't overreact and so on and so forth. And some guys don't even smile. When I played, I was a rule follower, and so I barely celebrated. I barely even raised my stick. So what I say to kids who want to play the game of hockey, especially African American kids or minorities, is that you're joining a country club. And so those are the rules of the country club. And so if you want to be a part of the country club, then you're going to have to abide by those rules, or else you're going to attract undue attention to yourself. And Tony, that's what happened to PK Subban. PK Subban could have been a megastar. I mean, this guy was showing up on the talk show, circuit and things like that, places where no other hockey player had been gone before, because he's interesting and whatnot. But going back to the scoring celebrations, he wanted to party when he scored a goal, and he'd do all this crazy stuff and whatnot. And the league just rejected him and kept on tamping him down and tamping him down and tamping him down, to the point where at the end of his career, he just wasn't the same person. So the way I look at that is, as a Black person or a minority person, is that if you want to play hockey, you can't be yourself. You have to go in there and be what they want you to be, abide by the rules, to go through it. But if you come in like PK, you act quote unquote like a Black person, you're going to get destroyed. And so the thing that frustrates me about the game is that hockey has a slogan that says hockey is for everyone. And I vehemently disagree. I feel like hockey is for this conformist person. But if you want to come in there and act like a Black man, like there's a guy, I'm not sure if you follow football, but there's a guy, he's retired now, but like Deion Sanders. Like, this guy comes in with the gold teeth and all this stuff and whatnot, and he acts like a quote unquote Black person. And if a guy like that came to hockey, the whole institution would implode. The flip side is that I think because of that, hockey is just not getting it's our best athletes. And so I think it hurts itself long road. But once again, if you like the model and if you like the way the game's played, then don't change it. And minorities have to come in there and abide by the rules. But the flip side is, like I said, a Black man cannot come to the ice rink and be a Black man. He has to come and act, quote unquote, like, I'll say, a hockey player. And if you step outside of that, then you're going to cause problems.
Yeah. And you wrote about a little bit about that in the book, like not wanting to draw attention to yourself.
Yeah.
And, you were careful about the way you would celebrate, and it was about the team, right? And even in your bio, you talked about we were celebrating Brent and Jarrett's number retirement in January, and you two played together. And so you were just you were aware of that even at that age.
Yeah. And I'll, almost for negative reasons, though, because when I played, it was just so unusual to have a Black person on the ice, and not only Black, but I'm dark skinned. There's some players, a lot of players that were light skinned, and they might have been mixed with a Black mother, white father, vice versa. So I come in, you put this Black skin in a white uniform and a white helmet, and people would be like, oh my God, like, what's this out there? And so everywhere I played, Tony, I became the focal point. Mm-hmm. And so I just try to respect that and honor that and just play the game hard, and then not, kind of show the tropes of a Black person on the ice. And that was my way of getting through it. And so even myself, when I saw a person like PK Subban come through, I thought, oh my goodness, this guy is going to get ruined and destroyed. And that's what happened. He just drew this attention to himself, and the system just rejected him.
Do you think, so talk to me, because you played in both major and minor leagues. So just for everyone's knowledge who's listening to this, if you're not a hockey enthusiast or purist, the NHL is the major league. Both the AHL, ECHL, they're considered minor league teams. So would you say that by your experience as a player, there was a difference between when you played in the NHL and minor league teams?
No, I'd say no. And that was one of my disappointments, is because I experienced so much racism in the minors I go to cities like Rochester or Birmingham, Alabama, and whatnot, and it was literally like a KKK rally. It was just like all night long. One time in Maine, I didn't think I was gonna survive the evening, and so I always felt that the NHL, just was utopia. Like I was striving to make the NHL. I felt like when I made it to the NHL, it would be different. And got there finally and found out the exact opposite. As a matter of fact, my first game was in the old Chicago Stadium, and there was just a lot of racism during that game, and a lot of it was on the ice. I mean, to tell you the truth, one of the things that differentiated was that the NHL rinks are so big, you can't really hear the individual voices, and so people would tell me, but I couldn't hear as much as I could hear in the minor league rinks. But it didn't matter. When I first came in Chicago, it was almost the entire Chicago Blackhawks team that was using the N-word against me and whatnot. And I was just so disappointed because I worked so hard to get there, and I felt that was where I wanted to be, or that's where I was meant to be. And yeah, I got there in that game, and it was awful.
Yeah, and this is one of the things that I admire so much about you, your willingness to be like transparent and honest and like, and that's one of the things that I'm the same way. So it's like, yeah, I mean, I'm running into all kinds of challenges as a white woman.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, by all accounts, I have the right color skin. I'm using air quotes, everyone, but I'm not a man. And I run into, and it's not within the organization at all. It is within sometimes the fan base, like you're talking about,
Yeah.
or within the league. And I think some of it, and so let me ask you about this. I mean, some of it is implicit bias, but I think some of people just don't know that they're exuding these biases towards people like you and I. Like they're just not aware. Now, I think there are some that are just outwardly racist or sexist, but then there
Yeah.
are some I don't think that they understand that some of their remarks might come off that way. And it's not as harsh, but do you see that varying degrees? Or
Oh,
do you feel it, or what's your experience with it?
my experience, in a word, is it sucks
Yeah.
because there's a spectrum, like you're alluding to. There's the pure bias or pure races that are just there that you have to deal with,
Mhm.
and you know it's there. And then kind of at the other end extreme, there's people who don't think that they're racist or they're biased, but they are, and so we call it unconscious bias.
Mhm.
But the reason why I say it sucks is that I saw this a lot in my pharmaceutical career, was that it could be racism, it could be unconscious bias, but the net result, Tony, was I wasn't getting that promotion. if even the person felt that they weren't racist, but they would find a reason to give it to a majority equivalent type of thing. And so that's something that happened throughout my entire life. Was there's some people that again they felt that they liked me and they felt that they weren't racist, but they still found a reason not to support me or not to give me that promotion or not to give me that raise or whatever it was. And so it sucks because it didn't matter if it was pure racism or unconscious bias, I still didn't get that raise.
Yeah, it does suck. That is the best way to it, because it's like we go back to, and you and I talked about this when we had coffee too, like speaking up and talking about these things. And there are days when we're tired, right? It's and
Oh,
you and I talked about this because I'm like, there are days where I am all about the next generation. Like
yeah,
I want to I heard this great saying, like, come on in, ladies. I'm putting you in the elevator and I'm taking you up there with me, wherever there is, because there's this, you broke barriers as a black man in hockey, and I'm breaking barriers as a white woman in leadership in sports. And I want these other women to ascend to where they want to go.
yeah.
It is work. It is work. So let's talk about what that feels like to just be tired. And not tired of like, yeah, I'm tired because it's been a long day, but the constant battling for
Yeah.
equality.
Well, I'll tell you, the net result was when I retired, I still am exhausted because you're working so hard every day. And if I use the hockey as an example, I purposely tried to be a positive example because I knew that, okay, I'm one of the first in this sport. And so I want to pave the way for people coming behind me, like what you're doing. And so everything that I did, all my behaviors had to be well thought through. And that was, exhausting in itself. Like I said, even things like my scoring celebration. I knew if I did what I wanted to do, I wanted to dance and party and that type of thing. And yeah, so everything had to be kind of confined and restricted. And so when I retired from the pharmaceutical industry, because to be quite honest with you, we talked about sports in my bio, but I had probably as much and more racism in my business career. When I retired, Tony, I was actually a pretty hot commodity because I was in biotech, and I had just launched. I was a vice president of marketing. I had just launched two orphan drugs, which were really kind of hot at the time. So everybody was looking for somebody with that experience, and had lots of people asking me to come in and do the same for their company. I was so exhausted, Tony. I just said, you know what? I'm just done. I just don't have an ounce of more of energy to do it. And so that's why I admire people like you, because to do what you're doing, and you have these weekends where we have people flying to Kalamazoo and whatnot, and you do this podcast. It's got to be exhausting, but I really admire the fact that once again you're helping the people behind you in so doing.
Yeah, and that it is through going to those who have paved the path before me to seek or to find that motivation. And
Yeah.
that's why I couldn't put your book down, because I was like, well, first off, you're on the Wall of Honor. You and I are both actually on this Wall of Honor together, and which I think is really cool, like that we both sit on this wall so for those who don't know, in my hockey world, the Kalamazoo Wings turned 50 years old this year. And so we had a wall of honor made, and it's comprised of ownership, front office employees, and players who've had a significant impact on the organization. And Bernie is on the wall, and I'm on the wall along with 48 other individuals. And it's really cool that we're in this space together. And you and I are kind of the standouts when it comes to race and gender, and we represent that. And I know how important that is to players that came behind you, like Joel Martin, and being a Black goaltender, right? And that wasn't easy. And well, being a goalie isn't easy in general, but they're special breed, aren't they, Bernie?
Yeah, there's something.
But I mean, because we look at you and think, okay, how did he do it, right? What can I learn from him that I could apply to today? So I don't, because I sit there and think, yeah, I'm tired some days, and I'm turning 47. So I'm like, okay, I want to still have the stamina to keep going, because I know I got more fuel in the tank, but the question is, how do I keep doing it? Right. And so I come to people like you to learn from your crystallized wisdom, because that's what that is. You've got the wisdom, and maybe I can figure out a way not to deplete myself too soon.
Tony, the thing that is probably the answer that you don't want is, again, I don't see much change happening. It's so like I said, if anything, I see regression. And I know we got to have people like you fighting the good fight on a daily basis, and that's all you can do. And it used to be, my generation, you can only change one person at a time. Well, with podcasts and other forms, you can change multiple people at a time, which is wonderful. But it's so hard to change, especially when people don't want to change. And one thing that I've kind of diagnosed as I look at kind of where the world is today and where the country is today, because I really want to understand what's happening. And where I evolved to is that if you're the majority, you're the majority, or say you're the favored. I can think, for example, I think of a monarchy, for example. If you're the king or queen, phone's ringing.
Oh, you're fine.
If you're the king or queen, you want monarchies to last forever, right? It's because you're the favorite, you're on top of the world. And so in the United States, I think that the white majority wants to stay on top of the world. I think that's their instinct. And there's a date, I forget if 19, we're 20, I forget the exact date, but it's not too far away where the white majority becomes the minority, the white minority. And I just think that there's a lot of fear about that. And the white majority wants to cling to that. And so I flip that and think, okay, if this was a black majority in a black country and the same was happening, I'm sure, I would hope I would have a better reaction, but yeah. I think that most people would be doing the same thing, like, oh, we want to cling to this, and what can we do to hold on to it? And so I think it's so hard to change the world when there's just that resistance, because it comes down to what's in it for me, and most people are doing it for what's in it for me. And kind of my philosophy and my life is the reverse. It's how can I serve? Like, how can I serve the world, and how can I help the world? I see that what you're doing, and you kind of have a ministry in this Women's In program and all the things that you do. So like I said, it's probably not the right answer that you want, because in the 60 years that I've been on this planet, I just don't know how to change that, because it always comes down to what's in it for me. And the people who are on top, or people who have the majority, they don't want to change that. They like that, they love that. They kind of have the preferred treatment, and they don't want to change that. And so long term, I just don't know how to change that.
Yeah. And I think that's what I want, the honest answer.
Yeah.
And that's okay. It's not all rainbows and unicorns and, kumbaya. That is not how this is. And I have learned so much from being in this world of hockey, good, bad, and the ugly.
Yeah.
So, I look at it all as growth. And if anything, I'm way less naive, maybe a little more jaded than I was when I started 10 years ago, because I did not come in thinking, I didn't think anything. I was just coming in to figure this thing out. And when I look around, I'm like, holy crap, there's a bunch of white dudes around here. I got some work to do. Yeah. And I find like most people don't want to speak up. Most women don't, and I don't fault them. And I say women in my chair, right? There's not very many of us, but they don't. I mean, to be fair, I've invited them on my podcast. I
understand that.
And they just don't want to. And so I sit there, and I'm obviously cut from a different cloth, but I think, why? What is it? Is it a fear? We're going back to fear. Is it a fear of being judged, or a fear of, I don't know. What do you think? I mean, it could be their personalities. What do you think it is, Bernie?
Well, in my case, I hate to put it this way, but in my case, I'm not saying this is other people, but I lived in such a white-dominated world. I went from hockey to the pharmaceutical industry, which was just lily white.
Yeah.
And I learned to navigate in both situations. But I felt if I spoke up, then it would be too disruptive, and there'd be a negative influence. There'd be pushback. And so I hate to say it, but this is true for me, is that I was kind of self-preserving or self-protecting. And again, that's one of the reasons why I wrote the book, is because I thought, okay, Bernie, you learned how to navigate that world, but what did you do to help the person behind you, and the things that you're doing? And the answer was not much. I did do some things because I felt that if I could be kind of the model citizen in both situations, then the people would be more accepting of the people behind me. And so I do feel like I did something, but I felt like I could have done a lot more. And again, that was part of the reason for the book. And but like I said, it's one of the reasons why I respect you, because I don't know if you sleep at night because you have so many projects going on, but you're out there just fighting the battle, and like I said, it's kind of one person at a time.
Yeah, it is. And I prioritize sleep. My husband will tell you I probably sleep too much. Um, I want to talk about an important woman that you wrote about in your book, which was your mom.
Yeah.
And talk to me about your mom and what her role was in your up and coming, burgeoning career in sports. And she did a lot, right? I mean, you wrote about.
Yeah, she was my best friend, but the irony about my mother was she was deeply flawed.
Mhm.
She's kind of a rebel. My grandmother, her mother, was the matriarch of the family, and she just kind of ran the system. Like even my grandfather was almost afraid of her. Like and she was so grounded. I learned most of my early lessons in life from my grandmother.
Mhm.
And then my mother had one sister, my Auntie Eve, and my Auntie Evie was almost perfect. She married a minister and lived this kind of idealistic life. And my mother was kind of a rebel. And so she went through a divorce with my father. And so most of my formative years were brought up through my mother.
Mhm.
And she became my best friend. And we were really kind of symbiotic. And she taught me a lot. Ironically, I think I told you this before, but ironically, she in a way brought me up to be a woman as opposed to a man type of thing. That was her instinct. And so I feel like I have more female instincts over male. And that really served me in my career. But the thing my mother did the most for me, which for me was so important, was she was just there. She was always there. I went through some hardships. We moved from house to house. We probably lived in over 20 houses in my lifetime. And the one consistency in my life was my mother, and then also my younger sister Gail. And so,
Yes.
yeah, a lot of things that became things that formed the later Bernie Saunders came from my mother.
Yeah. And what would you say your sister's role in your formative years were like? What was her role to you as the baby sister?
Yeah, it's a tough one because she lived in this male-dominated, world.
Mhm.
And my father has some great attributes. My father was the reason why I got my education, which was like a real important one for me. The flip side, he was Jamaican, and like he fooled around and extra marital affairs, and eventually he took on a different family. And Gail, my baby sister, had these two dominating older brothers. John, who just had a really dominant personality and became a famous sportscaster, and I was really good in sports, and so she lived in a world where it was just dominated by her older brothers, which made me sad because she didn't have a strong place. She just was kind of meant there to be decorating type of a thing.
Yeah.
And I think it affected her. Like she eventually passed away of complications of anorexia, but she went from one disease to another and just didn't make it in this world. And I just think it was because our family broke apart, and she needed to have a stronger role model. And my mother struggled to be the proper leader for her. And so it was a really sad story. She had 5 kids and eventually passed away. Yeah, she had eventually passed away in the early 30s.
Wow, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
And so here's something interesting. And so you'll probably chuckle at this. And I may have told you this already, but I think it was my husband or someone in the office said, "Do you know who Bernie's brother is?" And I said, "No, who?" And they said, "John Saunders." I'm like, "Okay, don't know who that is." And they're like, "Tony." ESPN. I'm like, well, I know what ESPN is, but so you were the one in my mind that was famous, not your brother. And then I'm like, oh, him. Once I looked it up, I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
oh, yeah. But I wouldn't have been able to name him in a lineup. But if it was said John Saunders or Bernie Saunders, I know who Bernie is,
yeah.
but not your brother. So I don't know how often you would hear that, but this girl was one of them. But what is it? Your brother was for those that did know him or watched him on TV, quite the big personality, right? And
Yeah,
famous.
he was a public face. Like, I don't like doing this stuff, but he was a public face. Just a great orator, and a charming personality. Like when he got the job with ESPN, ESPN was just this fledgling network, and they did these interviews where they film the potential talent, and put them in front of an audience, basically focus groups. And when they would do the focus groups with John, everybody just fell in love with him I think the thing that people liked the most about John is that he didn't have the ego that a lot of broadcasters have. He just went on there and he just talked, and he didn't try to be the news or the event. He told about the event, and people just fell in love with him. And so he got that job with ESPN when ESPN was just fledgling, and they're in the middle of the field in Bristol, Connecticut. And the rest is history. He grew with them, and he's now seen as one of the founding fathers of ESPN. Unfortunately, he passed away. Kind of complications, I'll say, of his diabetes and whatnot. So we lost him way too early, but yeah, he was a great man, and he was great in that industry. Like I said, he had the gift of gab, but he was just an amazing talent. I think because of his lack of ego, he just kind of went on, and he wasn't a nervous guy. He just kind of went on and did his thing, and people felt like he was just talking to them. It was kind of interesting because you said you didn't know him, but when you grow with John, there is star power. But it wasn't like, oh, you're, whoever, Denzel Washington or something like that.
Yep.
People would come up to him and say, almost like they knew him because, the way he would talk to him, say, hey, John, how you doing? And they're like, he'd never met these people in his life, but they felt they knew him because he was so conversational on TV.
Yeah. So are you the only remaining sibling?
Yeah.
What's
Yeah.
that feel like?
Oh, it's really weird.
Mm-hmm.
It's really weird. It makes me sad. It's really weird. Both my parents are gone, so it was a, unit of 5, the nuclear unit of 5. I'm the only one remaining,
Yeah.
and it's really weird and sad. I lost my mother about a year and a half ago. She was the last to go, and yeah, my brother and my sister went prematurely. So it's a really odd feeling.
Yeah. It's interesting. You and I were just talking before we hit record. My mom died 6 weeks ago,
Yeah.
and my husband will, we talk about it often, but he's like, how you feeling today? And at the beginning, my only descriptor, and it probably still is a little this way, is it's weird. So I totally get what you're saying. It's hard to find the right language, like to describe it other than it's weird.
Yeah.
I kind of feel untethered a little bit because it's the only other word I can come up with. It's just a weird feeling.
Yeah, and tether's a good word because most of my life I'm either a younger brother, an older brother, a son, or son of their parents, and you take away those things, and it just put me in a different space. But the flip side is I just try to celebrate the time that I had with them, and I love people like you that remember the legacy of my brother. And he also wrote a book because he suffered from depression.
Mm-hmm.
And so he wanted to kind of step out in that arena because it's, depression is difficult with athletes because, sports, it's all, the macho stuff like that. And so you're not supposed to show your weaknesses. And so he felt it was important for him to step out and talk about his weaknesses and his battle with depression. So I was happy that he did that and kind of left that as his legacy.
Oh, well, now I didn't know, it's a shocker. I didn't know John wrote a book. So I will now read John's book because you did write about it in your book. And
Yeah.
I always feel like, at least for me, like I find that the things that I'm most ashamed of, and for me, it was my relationship with alcohol, that if I shine a light on it, it will help others
Yeah.
know, like if I choose to talk about it, it could inspire others, but it can also reduce the shame and the stigma around these things like depression,
Yeah.
anxiety, alcohol use disorder. And so I've openly talked about my reasons for quitting drinking. It wasn't easy, but and it's going in my book too. I'm going to talk about it openly in there. So
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. They say your greatest ministry flows out of your pain, and that's again, I think that's where we should be in life. You go through something, and fortunately, you overcome it, but then you want to help people behind you. I think that's just a wonderful thing that you do.
and have you found, and we're going to start to wrap up our conversation here, but have you found because how many years has the book been published now? Is it 3 years?
Yeah, about 3 years, that range.
And are people still, I mean, because books, I mean, the beautiful thing about a book is it's there, like it's not
Yeah.
going anywhere. Are people still talking to you about this? I know there's a lot of hoopla when it first comes out, but as time has kind of quieted down, and are people still reading and reaching out?
A lot less. Like I said, I did a ton of media up in Canada. What I did with the book was because I don't want the attention. I kind of like my anonymity. So HarperCollins published it up in Canada, but HarperCollins USA did not want to publish because they felt that hockey books in general don't do well in the United States. And so that was a hard decision, but I proceeded with Canada. Then I got an offer in the United States to publish, but it was really late in the game. We're close to publication with HarperCollins. And I said, let's wait and see how it does in Canada. Because if it really pops in Canada, then of course, yeah, then we'll publish in the United States, and I'll do all the media stuff and whatnot in the States. But Tony, if it doesn't pop in Canada, it's not going to pop in the United States. And that's exactly what happened. Was it did okay in Canada, but they had plans for republication and soft cover and all this stuff, and we just had to slow down all that because the first edition just did average. And so with that said, we decided, at least I decided not to go forward in the States. And so because of that, I do see it dwindling. That first year I was doing interviews all the time, and like I said, I did all the Canadian national papers and whatnot, and it was pretty intense, but it did not convert to readership or book sales, and so I see it waning. So just every once in a while, but not very frequently now.
Well, I can tell you when you were in Kalamazoo, you had quite the line wanting to talk to you and get autographs of the book.
Yeah.
And I had lunch recently with our mutual friend, Kathy Beauregard, who is
Oh,
the
great.
athletic director at Western Michigan University. And you and I and Kathy have a ton in common because
Yeah.
of being minorities in our world, in our sports world. And so I keep finding wonderful people like you all to look up to and admire and ask questions and just yeah, you both are just such a great
Oh,
resource to
thank
me.
you.
So I want to thank you for that. And I told her, I was like, Bernie's fat, and so she's just raving about you as well.
Yeah, I
So
love Kathy. Love Kathy.
yeah, just some really great, and the work you all are doing is not lost for sure.
Yeah.
So we may be few and far between, but there are people like you and I and Kathy out there. So
You got to keep on fighting, right? You got to fight the fight.
yeah, we do.
Yeah.
So Bernie, usually I ask if people want to find you, where can they find you? But Bernie doesn't like to be found.
No, exactly.
So where I'm going to leave this is buy Bernie's book, and then you can.
Okay.
So
That's,
Shut Out, the Game That Didn't Love Me Black is the name of the book. Reggie Jackson wrote a nice little quote here about you.
yeah.
Shut Out is a great read. How cool is that? That's pretty
Yeah.
cool. Thank you. So if you want to check out more of Bernie's story, read that book. And then if you're looking to connect with me, I'm not hard to find. kwings.com if you're interested in my hockey life. On the other side of my life is my lifestyle coaching business, mindfulnesselevated.com or tonywillcoaching.com. And I am on social media, LinkedIn and Facebook at Tony Lentini Will, and Instagram at I'm Tony Will. So until next time, thanks, Bernie.
Thank you very much for having me.